episode of our Young Innovators series, we'll speak with Declan McLoughlin. Declan is a future trainee solicitor at Linklaters, who founded 𝙤𝙤𝙘𝙤, a social mobility charity dedicated to delivering bespoke careers education to social mobility cold spots across the United Kingdom. So thank you, Declan, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Perfect. So to kick off this episode, could you delve into your background and explain how you came to where you are today?
Yeah, I'm a socially mobile student from the East Midlands, Boston and Skegness sort of area. I grew up in sort of going to not great schools. My mum was a single parent to me and three other siblings who were significantly younger. On about, on sort of the welfare system as well. As sort of went through my teenage years, my mum grew unwell and ended up with cancer. She recovered, but it takes a while to sort of recover from it. And sort of in those years, I also acted as a young carer, and that took me through most of my GCSEs and sixth form. During sixth form, I also got a job and worked throughout to sort of help with pay the bills, etc. as well. And that sort of was the main driver towards me for founding channels, and also was a big sort of reason as to why I wanted to go into law as well. Sort of change things, and also, it's a high sort of professional, stable job, and that was sort of something I really aspired to.
Perfect. Well, I was going to ask, why did you found channels, but you kind of touched on that there. So I guess, were there any challenges, that you faced when you were trying to set up this organization?
Oh, so many challenges. I think getting FaceTime with anyone who can help you as a charity is quite difficult. As a business, you can treat things as an investment, and you can sort of sell it as, it's going to be a benefit to whoever you're getting to talk to. As a charity, it's completely different. Like I'm relying so much on goodwill of people, and there has been an amazing amount of goodwill from people, but it's always quite difficult sort of to galvanize that and really, take that and run with it. Alongside that, sort of deciding on the direction to go has been really difficult, because on the one hand, you've got the sort of light touch model that we have been following up until recently, doing little bits of impact that can hopefully serve as like the spark for inspiration for pupils. But, there's a lot of sort of systemic disadvantage that goes all the way down to almost year 2 for school pupils. And that's something that, I can't really tackle on a voluntary basis, and probably will never be able to tackle through channels, just because it requires so much work, and it requires almost like a national effort from the government.
As I said in the introduction, you founded channels. Could you tell our viewers a little bit about this organization, please?
Yeah, so we run a range of sort of extracurricular support, mainly around careers, but also on sort of like advancing into higher education for pupils in the East Midlands. Our model initially was quite light touch in that we'd, do a little bit of career support here and there, give mainly toolkits out to like CAIG advisors, so they could sort of like understand what's actually going on in the graduate recruitment market now, as opposed to 20 years ago when maybe they were looking at these sorts of areas. And we'd also do some e-mentoring and more online sort of careers materials, but we've sort of pivoted a little bit and now focus much more on providing hard services to people. So that includes tutoring, so pupils can log into our online portal from next month, maybe the month after, and book one-to-one sessions with a tutor totally free of charge, in any of their A-level subjects. They'll also be able to sort of see all the diversity schemes that are available across the country in law and in higher education, so like reduced offer schemes, etc., for a database, and loads more stuff like that is coming as well, like internships and like bespoke sort of longitudinal mentoring services. So really sort of in a crux, I guess, we provide the services that you could sort of expect a private school almost, alongside all of the like mainstream education.
That sounds really good, and it seems like it's very helpful to those who benefit from the services. But in terms of actually setting up channels, what did you actually have to do in the process? For example, did you need to set up a website? Did you have to go through the government in any way? Could you just discuss?
Yeah, I mean, so there's loads of ways to set up a charity, and it really sort of depends on the bespoke needs of your organisation. So for us, we managed to engage Linklaters on a pro bono basis to do our registration for us, and so we've now got a registration sitting with the Charity Commission through them. Alongside that, yeah, we needed the standard sort of build a website, get a presence. We've had quite a lot of back end development as well to sort of get our portal working, and that's ongoing. And then also recruiting a lot of volunteers and getting a team together. I'm mainly the face of channels, but there's 5 other trustees behind me, and then a bank of up to 40 volunteers or so who are in the process of being onboarded to sort of support our work. And that recruitment of those people has been like a huge effort and has made a world of difference.
So have you found that students are willing to help out with this, or is it, as you said, been a bit of a struggle?
No, we've never had an issue gaining volunteers. It's mainly been, like, our issues have mainly been around people sort of exterior to the organisation providing services. Students seem to be incredibly willing to give back, and I think it's really a real hallmark of sort of our generation, that everyone wants to pay it forward and recognises sort of their privilege to, you know, go on to university.
Yeah, so obviously coronavirus has, had a huge impact on law firms, on schools, and just generally everybody in society. So how has it impacted the work that you've done with channels?
We were very early stages when it happened, so we were in a really good position to sort of shift our model because we hadn't really put anything together. So we've been in sort of planning and preparation phase mostly for the past couple of months anyway. So it sort of gave us a boost almost of motivation, and we were like, this is now the perfect time to disrupt the sector, because sort of access groups are now looking at how they're providing their work. Universities are reviewing their agreements with other organizations as well, and this is the perfect time for us to sort of swoop in. So if anything, it was almost a benefit to us. And then the sort of secondary effects of COVID that we're now seeing come up, so like the debacle that was A-level results day, we're sort of, again, sort of still in the back seat. It can really take a wide view of that and see what we can do to shift ourselves and put ourselves in the best possible position to provide the support that's needed. So like I say, our model completely changed when it came to sort of results day, and we realized that we could do a lot more and that we were in a position to do a lot more.
Fantastic. Well, I think it's great that you've set up this organization, helping disadvantaged students. But have you found that there's, a lot of maybe not competition, but other organizations which are providing the service, or, is it quite sparse?
Odd. There's a lot and there's also not a lot. So I mean, you've got the big sort of titans of access, Sutton Trust, Social Mobility Foundation, etc. And then you've also got many sort of like tiny little startups that focus on a specific area or a specific sector. So like there's dozens now of legal blogs and things like that that are designed to sort of help access into the legal sector. And there's a lot more coming up for like university as well. We operate a quite nice middle ground in that we are going through and becoming a registered charity. So we're going to be incorporated as an organization and have got the longevity to sort of last compared to a lot of the other startups, but are sort of agile and small enough that we are able to adapt quite quickly and quite easily compared to like the big sort of organizations. And I think that's sort of our niche and our real difference. And I think that sort of means that we have sort of quasi competition from both sides.
You've spoken a little bit about, what you've done so far, and the fact that COVID has maybe helped you to adapt to a new way of doing things. But could you maybe discuss what your plans are for the future?
I'm still figuring that out. To be honest, so obviously I start a training contract in about 2 years, which means that we very much have a ticking clock for channels. Because I do a lot of the work at the moment sort of on my end, and I also have the sort of strategic vision for it. So that means that I need to sort of get channels into a place within the next 2 years where we can almost sit in a holding pattern, or where we can hand it off to someone else in like the next generation. But that means getting everything up and running now and actually doing work in the next year or so that we can repeat it and refine it and then be ready to sort of, hand the torch.
Yeah, well, you spoke about your strategic plan there. So when you were starting off, a lot of the time people have plans for what they want this organization to do. Did you have like an in-depth and a very strategically led plan, or were you more flexible in terms of what this organization was going to do?
Because of my sort of working style, I write everything out and then rip it up and change it again the next day, which means that I've probably got about 10 strategic plans somewhere across my hard drive. So yes and no. I think it all sort of, we're still trying to find our golden thread, as it were, the one thing that sort of makes us, that strings all of our work together. But by and large, I sort of want, my strategic vision is that we're in, most of the schools in the East Midlands, doing sort of the key work that we want to do and having provision. I'd also sort of like to be able to employ a couple permanent members of staff, and be in the position to sort of put them in schools, similar to what the Access Project does, like having 2 3-day a week careers advisors in schools that we sort of supply.
Have you found that accessing capital or cash, donations is quite a challenge? Have you managed to?
So challenging. We've raised about £200 of donations so far, but are holding off on raising any more because we're in the process of registering as a charity. So as soon as we register, we're eligible for gift aid, and that's a huge boost. But in terms of sort of like grants and funding and donations, etc., it's really difficult, especially at the moment, because everyone needs them and there's not enough to go around. And so being a sort of new startup charity, grant making bodies are less willing to invest in us because, we're an untested model, as it were. So making that case is really difficult. We're hoping to sort of break through that with registration, and we think that will be a big sort of win in our favour, because it's a vote of confidence from the Charity Commission that we are a charity, we're regulated, and we are doing the work.
And in terms of within the legal sphere, have you found that lawyers have been quite receptive to your organization? Have they given you any feedback and support?
Yeah. Everyone I've sort of asked has been like really interested, and they sort of agree with what I'm saying. I think we've not really sought much feedback from like lawyers specifically. We sought a lot from sort of like graduate recruitment teams, and they've been really sort of forthcoming with that and advising us on what they think. I think there is a general feeling in the legal sector, especially among sort of like mid to junior level associates, of giving back and sort of like helping organizations like mine when it pops up, and if you ask, usually you'll get in some way, shape or form.
What made you so passionate about improving social mobility and supporting people within the legal sphere?
We don't necessarily just focus on law. The only reason we work on law solely at the moment is because it's what I know. The sort of idea is to expand to like the full range of opaque, as it were, professions. So, banking and finance, consultancy, policy, etc. But I mean, I'm passionate about those professions because that's the sort of traditional vision of social mobility, is moving from sort of, a not great background to a professional sort of stable job as a lifelong learner, and being able to then, pass that sort of knowledge and that wisdom on to, your children, everything like that. And I do believe in that vision to some extent, or to most of the extent actually. I think that it is the best sort of way out of poverty, is go to university, get a degree and get a job, and like a professional job, and have that for the rest of your life. Because once you work one job as a professional, it opens up so many doors, and like the legal sector is especially good for that. Yeah, I mean, that's sort of it in a nutshell, I think.
So what would you like to see law firms and maybe the government as well do in order to improve social mobility, on a grand scale?
Moving out of London is a big one. And it's a two-way thing. We need to move out. We need to have the businesses move out of London, and we also need to increase sort of links to London. HS2 is going to be brilliant for the North when it sort of like comes together, if it comes together. And I know there's a lot of sort of disagreement, and HS2 can be quite polarizing, but the sort of crux of it is that all the opportunity is concentrated in London, for better or worse. And so any easier way of accessing London just increases opportunity. But alongside that, we do need businesses to start moving out of London and looking to places like Birmingham, Manchester, Leeds, Lincoln, these sorts of smaller towns and cities, and really sort of considering making these hubs of business as well. We're already starting to see it happen in Leeds, to be fair. Leeds becoming quite a busy sort of legal city. I think once that sort of happens, the outreach models we see in London will start transferring over to there as well. And we'll see corporate social responsibility from big law firms popping up in places like Leeds and Birmingham, etc. And hopefully that should diffuse out and we'll see some sort of mobility there. And that's sort of one of the main benefits of COVID-19. Remote working means that, you can live anywhere in the country and still work in London, as it were.
Yeah, well, again, COVID has presented many opportunities, and I guess working from home and the ability to do vacation schemes or just general work experience programs, has probably helped, with social mobility. But what challenges do you think working class students face who want to work for a large London city firm?
I hate the term imposter syndrome, but it is sort of probably the closest and most recognizable term here. I think it is a big challenge, sort of like wondering whether you belong and like really sort of backing yourself, because confidence is a huge thing.
Do you think that the culture of the firm should maybe adapt to accommodate people from disadvantaged communities?
I don't know how. This is the thing, because imposter syndrome isn't necessarily about, it's about feeling like you don't belong because you've not earned it, right? So it's very hard as a firm in what is an incredibly competitive profession to sort of alleviate that, and it often does come from sort of within, and sort of the reassurances that I have earned this. What firms can really be doing is sort of looking at making sure they're looking for talent in all the right places and not just at sort of the big universities. They need to sort of give attention across the board, which is something Linklaters does really well, in fairness. And make just sort of, because if you see people taking an interest in you, your university, your town, it gives you a little bit of reassurance, right? That because they're looking for you in your area. And that's the big thing about channels. Like, there's not a huge amount of interest in the East Midlands from corporates and governments, the government, etc. So sort of we want to, draw people in and sort of show off the talent that is there.
Yeah, and a lot of work experience programs and placements, are in London, concentrated in London. So do you think this perpetuates, the lack of social mobility for people who maybe live in, the north of England or, outside of London?
Yeah, 100%. I think work experience, and this is sort of the issue that comes with all of like organisations being based in London. London has its social mobility challenges, but they're a very different sort of challenge to the rest of the country. Unfortunately, because so much of government is based in London, because so many of the access organisations are based in London, because metrics like index of multiple deprivation are skewed towards London when you use them for access criteria, our approach to access and participation has been very London-centric. And that in of itself means that we're not catering to the challenges that are faced outside of London, which is things like not being able to actually get to work experience, or, not being able, there literally being no one that offers work experience in your area, not even knowing that certain professions exist.
Do you think that law firms should focus more on virtual work experience programs to sort of provide a remedy for this?
I'm in two minds. I think there definitely needs to be some virtual work experience on offer, but there's nothing quite like getting into the office. And what you risk doing by running virtual work experience schemes only is creating a divide where people in London can also get physical work experience and people from outside of London cannot get physical work experience. And then physical work experience being looked on much more favourably because obviously it's in person, and you just create a two-tier system. So there still needs to be a balance of actually getting pupils into London or bringing opportunities outside of London.
Fantastic. Well, we've touched on many areas, relating to social mobility, how law firms and governments have responded to social mobility. But do you think the government, over maybe the past decade or two, has done a good job, of trying to resolve this issue for, people from deprived areas?
It's hard to sort of say. For a start, I haven't sort of been, obviously I've only sort of entered into this sphere like a couple of years ago. I haven't really seen their track record over the decade. That being said, what I do know is, again, it's been so London centric in the focus, and it always has been. I was nominated for an award, and what the person who nominated me said was literally that I was ahead of the curve for the government and the university that had been nominating me in drawing the focus to rural sort of areas. So it's indicative that there's never been enough focus outside of London, and it's something that this current government has said they are focusing on, but we haven't necessarily seen them do anything about it. Not necessarily their fault, given there have been some, more pressing issues. But I guess the sort of true judge will be in the next couple of years.
I guess as a final question, do you have any advice for students from deprived areas who may want to work for a large city law firm but don't have the confidence or the self-belief to be able to apply and make those positive applications?
Just do it. And I know that's quite a blunt sort of thing, but what is there to lose? A lot of the time is the question you sort of have to ask yourself. You're going to make this application, you might lose 2 hours of your life, but you might also get an opportunity that's going to change your life. There's also a degree of asking, or you've got to ask, and otherwise you won't get. So for example, I applied for a work experience in Newcastle as my first piece of work experience, which is like a good 4 or 5 hours away. No mention of sort of travel expenses or anything like that, but I asked, and they paid my mileage and they paid my accommodation for the week, and things like that. And also sort of, take advantage of the opportunities that are there and the sort of hubs that are around you. Whether it is the Social Mobility Foundation or channels or whatever, that there are things popping up, and you need to sort of look for them.
Thank you very much. I think that was a bright note to end this discussion on. But just before we finish, where can people find you and where can people find channels?
Yep, so find me on LinkedIn is probably the best place to find me, Declan McLoughlin, McLoughlin. And then for channels, have a look on our website, www.channelscharity.co.uk.
Perfect. I'll add those links in the description. Thank you, Declan, for joining. You've been a fantastic guest.
And thank you for having me.
Perfect. I'll see you later.